It's 1817, and the workers filing into Phillips and Lee's cotton mill in Manchester are confused. Through the windows, they can see something impossible, the spinning floor blazing with light at 9 o'clock at night. Not the dim, flickering glow of candles or oil lamps they're used to, but actual brightness. Gas lights. Hundreds of them. The foreman tells them they're testing something. A night shift, just for a week. Nobody realizes they're watching the birth of the modern workday. See, Phillips and Lee had just installed William Murdoch's coal gas lighting system, the same technology that was starting to illuminate London streets. Cost them a fortune. But the engineers noticed something immediately. Their new lights didn't flicker out after a few hours like oil lamps. They didn't need constant refilling. They just burned, all night if you wanted. And someone asked the question that changed everything. Why are we paying for these lights if the machines are sitting idle in the dark? The workers that first night described it as unnatural. Walking into the mill felt like stepping into a daytime that shouldn't exist. The normal rhythm of sunrise and sunset, the clock that had governed human labor for literally thousands of years, just vanished. One worker later wrote that it felt like the world had been turned inside out. Management thought they were just running an efficiency test, a few extra hours of production to maximize the lighting investment. What they'd actually done was accidentally solve a problem they didn't even know they had, and create one nobody could have predicted. Because once you light up a factory, you can't pretend you don't see all that expensive machinery sitting there, motionless, in the dark. Here's what nobody tells you about early Industrial Revolution factories. They were phenomenally expensive to operate, and stopping them was even more expensive. Think about a textile mill in the 1810s. You've got a massive steam engine in the basement that weighs several tons and requires constant pressure. You've got intricate power transmission systems, leather belts, iron gears, wooden shafts running the entire length of the building. You've got hundreds of spinning jennies or power looms, each one requiring precise tension and heat to work properly. And here's the engineering nightmare. You couldn't just flip a switch. Starting a factory in the morning meant stoking coal fires for hours to build steam pressure. It meant carefully bringing each machine up to speed so belts didn't snap and gears didn't strip. One Scottish mill owner calculated it took 4 hours and cost roughly 40% of a day's fuel just to get everything running at operational temperature. So every time you shut down for the night, you were burning money twice, once to stop everything, once to start it again. The traditional solution was obvious: run during daylight hours, accept the costs. But gas lighting broke that equation. Mills like Phillips and Lee started thinking, what if we just didn't stop? The first mills that tried continuous operation ran into problems nobody anticipated. Looms that ran for 16 hours straight started overheating. The friction from constant motion created hot spots that occasionally ignited cotton fibers. One Manchester mill had 3 small fires in the first month of night operations. Workers fared worse. After 12 hours, foremen started reporting strange behavior: spinners staring blankly at their machines, weavers falling asleep standing up, hands still moving automatically. There's a documented case from a Leeds mill in 1818 where a worker hallucinated that her loom was full of snakes and started screaming, setting off a panic. The gas lights themselves were dangerous. They burned coal gas under pressure, and leaks were common. In poorly ventilated mills, workers reported headaches, nausea, and vision problems. Some mills had to install primitive ventilation systems, just holes cut in the roof with wind-powered fans, because the gas buildup was making people pass out. But profits were undeniable. A mill running 16 or 18 hours instead of 10 could increase output by 60–80% without adding new machines. Just more shifts, more workers, more hours. One factory manager wrote to a colleague in 1819, "We thought the lights were an improvement to safety and precision. We discovered they were an improvement to everything." They weren't trying to create a 24-hour workday. They were just trying to avoid the cost of cooling down and reheating several tons of iron machinery every single day. Let me tell you about Robert Blincoe. He was 11 years old in 1819, working at Lytton Mill in Derbyshire. His written testimony, given later as an adult, describes what happened when his mill switched to extended hours under gas lighting. First shift, 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. 8 hours, manageable. Then management added a twilight shift, 2 to 10 at night. Still 8 hours, but now the mill ran 16 hours total. Then they decided to eliminate the gaps. If you were on the late shift, you worked 2 to midnight. If you were on the early shift, you started at 4 in the morning. The mill ran 20 hours a day, dark to dark. Robert describes children collapsing at their stations, not sitting down tired, actually dropping unconscious onto the factory floor. Overseers carried buckets of cold water to throw on them. If that didn't work, they'd drag them outside for air and send in a replacement. Robert himself passed out twice in 1 week. He watched a girl named Mary Richards get her hair caught in a spinning frame because she was too exhausted to notice it had come loose from her cap. They had to cut her free. She had a bald patch for months. The medical understanding of fatigue was primitive. Doctors in the 1810s thought exhaustion was a moral failing, not a physical condition. There was no concept of shift work disorder or circadian rhythm disruption. When workers complained of constant headaches, digestive problems, and what we now recognize as depression, the standard medical advice was basically eat more red meat and pray harder. But some doctors noticed patterns. A physician named Charles Turner Thackeray studied Leeds textile workers in the early 1820s and documented something he called factory night sickness. Workers on extended hours developed pale skin, sunken eyes, and a characteristic tremor in their hands. They had trouble sleeping even when they had the chance. Their appetites vanished. He was describing the first mass-scale encounter with chronic sleep deprivation in human history. Families fractured. In traditional labor, even brutal agricultural work, families operated on the same schedule. Everyone woke at dawn, everyone slept at sunset. But factory shifts scattered families across the clock. Fathers working midnight to noon never saw their children awake. Wives and husbands passed each other coming and going, ships in the night. One foreman at a Manchester mill, a man named Thomas Worsley, wrote in his diary about sleeping on cotton sacks in the mill during his breaks because going home for 2 hours wasn't worth the walk. He did this for 3 years. His wife thought he'd taken a mistress. He'd actually just stopped leaving the factory. The most chilling part, workers adapted. After 6 months on night shifts, Robert Blincoe said he stopped feeling the wrongness of it. Your body learns to survive anything if it has to. But just because you survive doesn't mean you're okay. Here's how quickly it happened. In 1815, virtually no British factories operated more than 12 hours a day. By 1825, over 60% of major textile mills in Manchester, Leeds, and Glasgow had implemented extended or continuous operations. No law required it. No government mandated it. No single company forced the change. It spread through pure economic pressure. A mill owner in Stockport reads in the newspaper that his competitor in Manchester increased output by 70% using night shifts. He installs gas lighting within 6 months. His competitor across town sees his production numbers and does the same. Within 2 years, every major mill in Stockport is running extended hours. Newspapers celebrated it. The Leeds Mercury ran an article in 1821 praising the conquest of darkness and claiming that gas lighting had liberated industry from the tyranny of the sun. They called it progress. They called it the future. Executives bragged about it openly. Richard Arkwright, Jr., son of the famous inventor, boasted in Parliament that his mills never slept and that his machines had achieved perpetual motion through human ingenuity. He meant the gas lights. He didn't seem to register he was also describing his workers. The economics were brutally simple. If your competitor runs 18 hours and you run 12, you need 50% more machines to match their output. Machines cost money. Workers. And this is the horrifying calculus. Workers were cheap, especially children. So factories copied each other, and the practice became standard not through careful planning, but through competitive panic. There were resistors. Some Quaker mill owners refused extended hours on moral grounds. A few Scottish mills limited operations to 14 hours maximum, but they were outliers, and many eventually gave in or went out of business. By 1830, the 24-hour factory wasn't an innovation anymore. It was just how things worked. And almost nobody asked whether this was a good idea. The question everyone asked was, can we make it more efficient? The answer, horrifyingly, was yes. Factories started formalizing shift systems. Instead of chaotic overlapping hours, they created standardized rotations. 6-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. Different factories experimented with different models, but the core concept was the same. Divide the day into blocks, assign workers to blocks, keep the machines running. This wasn't some evil mastermind's plan for worker exploitation. It emerged organically from thousands of small decisions made by factory owners trying to maximize expensive equipment. Each decision was logical in isolation. Together, they created a system that fundamentally restructured how humans relate to time. The really wild part, workers didn't universally hate it. Some preferred night shifts because they paid slightly more. Some liked avoiding the daytime heat. In the bizarre logic of industrial labor, working overnight became just another condition of employment, like long hours or dangerous machinery. Awful, but normal. And that normalization was the real victory for the 24-hour workday. Once something becomes normal, it becomes invisible. You stop questioning whether it should exist at all. Here's the irony. Gas lighting was supposed to make factories safer. And it did. Fewer fires from oil lamps. Better visibility meant fewer accidents. Workers could actually see the machines that might kill them. But by solving one problem, it created a cascade nobody anticipated. The 24-hour factory didn't just change working hours. It restructured the entire concept of time in industrial society. Before gas lighting, human activity followed natural rhythms. Dawn to dusk, sunrise to sunset. Even the worst pre-industrial labor had built-in limits because you physically couldn't see well enough to work. Artificial lighting removed that constraint. For the first time in human history, productivity was decoupled from daylight. The effects rippled outward. Once factories ran continuously, everything that supported them had to adapt. Coal deliveries at midnight, night watchmen, street lighting so workers could get to and from shifts safely, bakeries opening at 3 a.m. to feed the early shift, pubs staying open late for the night shift coming off work. Cities started operating 24/7 because factories did. By the 1840s, you could trace the direct lineage. Gas lighting enabled continuous factory operation, which normalized shift work, which created the modern concept of the work schedule, which eventually led to standardized time zones, because railroad-based factory supply chains needed synchronized clocks, which led to the 8-hour workday movement, because workers were trying to claw back some control over time, which led to modern labor laws. All from one lighting upgrade. Today, we take 24-hour operations for granted. Emergency rooms, police stations, server farms, airlines, logistics centers, convenience stores. Our entire civilization runs on continuous operation. Roughly 15 million Americans work night shifts right now. We've built entire industries around the assumption that human labor can be scheduled in blocks around the clock. And we're still dealing with the consequences. Shift work disorder affects millions. Night shift workers have higher rates of heart disease, diabetes, and depression. We know circadian rhythm disruption is harmful, but we've built an economy that requires it. The people who installed gas lighting in Phillips and Lee Mill in 1817 just wanted better light. They couldn't have known they were starting a transformation that would restructure human civilization's relationship with time itself. That's the thing about technological change. The first-order effects are obvious. Better lighting means safer work. The second-order effects take decades to understand. Better lighting means work never stops. And the third-order effects, we're still living them. Every time you clock in for a night shift, every time you order something at 2 a.m. and expect it to arrive the next day, every time you go to a 24-hour gym or pharmacy or diner, you're experiencing the world that gas lighting created. They were just trying to see in the dark. They accidentally invented the modern workday.